the whole idea of sanctions presumes that there's some sort of majority power that can actually effectively impose those sanctions. But we don't really seem to have that anymore. And so all of this just seems to be one big mistake that's it's not just hasn't worked, but it seems to be backfiring quite badly now.
Yeah, that's right. I would put it slightly differently. I would say you can define the sanctions and you can impose them. The question is what happens next. There was a complete inability. And by the way, I'll pull myself out as a sanctions expert. I worked for the intelligence community for over a decade. I did a number of things, but one of the things I did was economic warfare, financial warfare, sanctions. I worked for a group. We have something in the United States. It's called CFIUS, and you say CFIUS, and people will say, "Does it itch or burn?" But it stands for the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. But it's a group that vets foreign investment, takeovers of U.S. companies, not from an economic or antitrust perspective, but from a national security perspective. And I was one of the experts on that. So it just happens to be something I know a lot about, and I've lectured on this at the U.S. Army War College. And I said, look, it's easy to come up with a list of sanctions. The question is, can you think not just one move ahead, but 2 moves ahead, 3 moves ahead? What's the reaction function? How does it actually, what's the blowback? Does it end up hurting you more than it does the enemy, in this case, Russia? And the answer is often yes. And the reason is fairly straightforward, which is, we spent 30 years getting a densely interconnected, globalized economy. How on earth do you think you can blow up one part of it and not affect all the other parts? Of course it does. And there are many, many examples, but the most, just to recite some facts, not opinions, but facts. Russia's oil and natural gas revenues are at all-time highs. Any oil that Europe doesn't want for whatever reason, the Chinese and the Indians are happy to buy it, and they are buying it. They say, well, we're gonna call Lloyd's of London and tell them they're not allowed to insure Russian vessels. Well, it sounds effective. Gee, how are you going to ship the oil if you can't get insurance on the vessel? I guess they've never heard of captive insurance companies or what's called self-insurance. I mean, this goes back to the Merchant of Venice, Shakespeare in the 16th century, which is you get a group together, you got 20 vessels. You all take a slice of your revenue, you put it in a pool. You say, we hope for the best, but if one of those vessels is seized or sinks, then we pay for it out of the pool. That's called self-insurance. That's what people did before insurance companies were invented. So my point being, these things sound good. They have a feel-good aspect to them, but they're tried and true workarounds, or they don't work the way people expect. So Russia's oil and gas revenues are at an all-time high. They've got willing buyers in China and India and elsewhere. By the way, a very long list of countries are neutral on this. We all, US and EU and UK and Canada, Australia, Japan. Okay, that's a pretty powerful bloc. I get it. But look at the major economies that have stayed on the sidelines. So, India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, et cetera. There's the BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization members in Central Asia, a lot of very, China. So a lot of very powerful economies are not playing along with this. The ruble is it's almost too strong. I mean, our friend Elvira Nabiullina, the head of the Central Bank of Russia, she may be looking to cut interest rates. In fact, she already has to some extent, to kind of weaken the ruble because it's too strong. It's not only stronger than it was before the war began. It was about 80 to 1. The war began. It had a little quick dip to 140, then came back to 80. But then it went to like 70 and 65. That's a very strong ruble relative to recent years. So again, that helps them get around the boycott because the ruble goes further if you're trying to buy imported goods. So and again, many other examples. So reserves are up, hard currency reserves are up, oil, gas sales are up, the ruble is stronger. And meanwhile, what's going on in the West? In the US, $5 a gallon for gasoline. I know that seems cheap to Europeans, but trust me, for Americans, that's unheard of. Well, it is, it's a record high. But it's
German trade balance is the big one, isn't it? That's extraordinary that they've managed to reverse one of the most famous export powerhouses in the world to reverse their trade balance. It's just
correct. We were a net exporter of oil. Now we're an importer at high prices. Although we are exporting, this is just kind of in the news the last couple of days. Everyone knew that we were drawing down our Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the SPD, in theory to mitigate gas price increases in the United States. So, well, not enough oil, here's some oil, we'll take it out of the Strategic Reserve. Well, number one, the problem was never oil, it's refining capacity. You have to turn the oil into refined products, whether it's gasoline, diesel, or kerosene, which is jet fuel. And the bottleneck is at the refineries, not at the oil, number one. Number two, that Strategic Petroleum Reserve is not, why don't we just pump some? Why are we taking our national security reserve and selling that? Why don't we just pump more oil, which we're entirely capable of doing? Well, that gets into the Green New Scam and all of that, the ideology and the politics of it. But just to make it worse, as if that's not bad enough, there's good evidence that some of those cargoes are going to China. We're not even using our own oil, even though we're diminishing our national security in the process. We're selling it to the main enemy. It's so bad. The policy is so bad that I think I'm a little late to this one. A lot of people reached this conclusion earlier. I was resisting it, but I have to say, stupidity is no longer an explanation. This must be what they want. It's so, if you were just stupid, if you were just dumb, you would be right about half the time. You would be guessing, you wouldn't know what you're doing, but just random outcomes, you would be right about half the time if you were really dumb. To be wrong all the time suggests design. It suggests that this is actually what they want. The greenies want higher gasoline prices because they think it will encourage, discourage gasoline consumption, encourage the purchase of electronic vehicles, EVs, Teslas and so forth. So people who can barely afford a $30,000 car are supposed to go buy a $75,000 car as the solution. This is the elite bubble. It's impenetrable. I was once caught in a blizzard, actually a hurricane, if you can believe it, at high on Denali, which is the highest mountain in North America. And our guide, we had a small group, and our guide described our experience as being like inside a ping pong ball. It was a whiteout. We couldn't see more than a few feet in front of us. Extremely dangerous. But she said it's like being inside a ping pong ball. I thought, well, that's actually a pretty good description. But that kind of describes the elites. They're in a bubble. They're in a ping pong ball. They're not in touch with everyday Americans, let alone people around the world. And so, short answer is Russia, has now rolled up Severodonetsk. They took Lysychansk. They've got Mariupol. They've got Kherson. They had Crimea since 2014. They're consolidating their gains in what's called the Donbass, which is Donetsk and Luhansk, and continuing. It's brutal, it's bloody, it's violent, but they're winning on the ground and they're winning economically. So I think that Europe is on the wrong side of this. I think they realize that they're just looking for a way out.
When I interviewed Nigel Farage about the sanctions and these topics about 2 weeks ago, we talked about the same sort of ideas that this is beyond stupidity now. And his theory was, and this applies to politics more broadly, is that politics is all about feelings today. It's not about realities. And if you accept that, then denying reality in favor of the feeling side is the ultimate sort of virtue signal. And it seems to me that is behind what all these bizarre outcomes are showing. It's that they are, declaring that they're just going to deny the fact that sanctions are doing so much damage because they want to feel good about imposing sanctions. And I think that explains the bias towards doing ridiculous things over and over again.
Jim describes the new FatTel portfolio as a combination of assets to own right now that make ongoing chaos manageable, even profitable for you going forward. To watch the webcast, hit the link below.